This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. So, welcome. Hi, Rachel. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us again in Ekklesia. We are coming to this place from Texas, South Carolina, California, right now Michigan, and I'm not sure, I think the iPhone is my husband, so that's probably South Carolina too. It's just great to be here and be able to be in this circle of friends, to be inspired, to think about parts of our faith journey and parts of how we live our life faithfully to ourselves and to God, and to be inspired in creative ways to do that. And so when Jeff and Pratima, when I found out that they lead workshops on spiritual relationships, I was like, oh, this would be a good one. We're going to get a Cliff Notes version, is my understanding tonight, of a workshop that or classes that they teach that are like 6 or 8 weeks long, I think. So I'll let them tell you more about that and pass this over to Jeff and Pratima. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Pratima, since you're my director tonight, you go ahead and get us started.
So thank you so much for having us, and just a little introduction about myself. So Jeff and I have been married for about, I don't know, 15 or 16 years. How many?
I think you're right. I think it's 16. We've been together a little over 17. 17
years. Before I met Jeff, I had my own, spiritual journey. And one thing that I was looking for in relationship with somebody that I could share my spirituality with. So spiritual relationships was something really important to me. And we had done a course called, what is that called? Self-mastery. And in this self-mastery course, we have a whole chapter on spiritual relationships. And what we want to talk about tonight really is communicating, because at the basis of every relationship, whether it's with your spouse, or in our case, a teenager, or co-workers, communication is the one thing that helps strengthen every one of those relationships.
Yeah, so, and as Pratima noted there, this is not, while we originally learned to apply this in our marriage and then with our child, I use this in my business dealings, and I'll share a story a little bit later where I'm a defense contractor, and my company was about to lose $100 million contract. And by using these principles, some of the principles we're going to talk about tonight, we were able to completely turn that around in a matter of months. The Army shared with me actually this last year that they were going to terminate us for cause before I took over the program. And because of the way that I handled things using some of these principles, not only did they do a 180 on that, but they gave us the follow-on contract, which is worth another $50 million that we're into now. So the types of things that we're talking about, and actually, Michelle, the way that you initiated this call about I versus you, that's one of the things that we're going to touch on as to how important it is to use first-party communication, especially in our relationships. And then I'll turn it back to Pratima here.
So one thing we all love is conflict, right?
Oh boy, sign me up.
And in spiritual relationships, we teach that conflict is really necessary. It's a way for us to learn more about each other and really more about myself. So every time that Jeff and I have a conflict, I can either blame him, which is so easy to do, right? Blame, shame, victim game. I would love for it to always be, his fault.
Yeah.
But really in spiritual relationships, we have to take the onus that there is a reason that this conflict is happening. And the conflict is happening to help me grow. It's to help me see something that is triggering me, right? So there are some techniques that we can use to help us become better at conflict. So the first one of those we talk about is just the definition of a spiritual relationship. Jeff, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So one of the things that we learned is, old world relationships, came together and were formed for the purpose of companionship and procreation, right? And with a spiritual relationship, those things are still a part of the relationships, especially in a spousal relationship. But they're also, you consciously form a relationship knowing that one of the primary purposes of the relationship is you're going to consciously use the relationship with your other person for the evolution of your spiritual growth, which when you consciously use it that way, your growth can leap forward years, in a matter of months, if both people are consciously using it. And again, this can work whether it's your spouse or your child, and this is something we have taught our teenager how to do. And that way, if she knows that if I'm upset about something, it has really nothing to do with her. This is because I take responsibility for my feelings. If I feel something, my feelings, so I take responsibility for it, and I use the process of feeling those emotions, those physical sensations in my body, because when emotions, it's energy, right? And it's kind of like food. This is one of the analogies we learned is emotions are like food. They're designed to be taken in and ingested and processed and released, right? Not taken in and held onto for years and then used to form grudges and distances and all this kind of stuff. When you take that energy in and you really feel it and you process it, there's wisdom to be gained there, about why we react the way that we do. And so that kind of forms the basis of when we consciously go into it this way, it kind of forms the basis of what a spiritual relationship is. And I want to touch on something. The course, Pratima had come up with a name for this course. We didn't teach it as spiritual relationships. The name she came up with this was Skirmish with Purpose, right? So it was, we're going to use that conflict as a mean with purpose, not just as a means to blame the other person.
All right. So there is another course that I did called Love and Logic, and Love and Logic it's actually for kids. You know, parents, it's a parenting technique. And one of the main things they teach is to speak with compassion. So when Jeff and I were first married, our skirmishes would be quite intense, right? Like a lot of heated emotions, a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of loudness.
Yeah.
So what I learned with Love and Logic is that it's really important to really stay in a state of compassion, right? So if we're having a conversation and Jeff is really upset, let's just say he's yelling, then my job is to recognize that, okay, he's triggered, like this is really painful for him. So I'm going to stay really compassionate and I'm going to keep my voice in a very level tone and start using the principles that we teach. And the first principle is the most important is we both commit to using the process, and it's responsibility communication. So we have an agreement that we're going to use responsibility communication. And so one of the very first things you have to do is heal first. So when we're both aggravated, that's not the time to sit down and talk. That's the time to say, I need a minute. I need to go to my cave. I need to be alone. And I need to start processing my emotions. So we had kind of talked about that a little bit, and processing emotions is something that we're not taught. We don't know how to do this. It's not something I learned as a kid. I was taught, don't cry, right? Big boys don't cry. Whatever all that stuff is, just shake it off, like it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel hurt. And so what our partner can do for us is I own my feelings by using first party communication. So instead of saying, you hurt me, I can say, I felt really hurt when this happened. And Jeff, if you want to use your example of your customer, however you were able to kind of like own your feelings and then also help validate theirs.
Yeah. So what happened with this customer is they were, when we originally won the contract, they had gone out of their way to help us to win this contract because we had a sister contract that we had performed, and I'd been a part of that, and we had performed really well on it. And so they went out of the way to give us a few bites of the apple to win the contract. And they even came up to me, the product manager even came up to me at the post-award conference and said, we're so happy that you finally figured out how to write this proposal and get this into us the right way. And, you did have the lowest price, but it was your previous proposals just weren't that great. But we wanted you to win this because of your previous performance. And then over the next 18 months, we fell flat on our face and didn't perform the way that we had done it. And they were I was hearing very angry with us. We received pretty much a cure letter that says you will get it together or else. And so because I had been involved with things before, I got involved. I was asked to take over the program, and I started listening to this product manager, and I could tell how upset he was. And so I put myself in his shoes, and I thought, man, first of all, I was really embarrassed for the way that my company handled this project. I was. And the second thing is I knew that if I was in his position, and I knew he had stuck his neck out for us, that he felt really betrayed. So I sent him an email and I told him that very thing. I said, Bill, I feel embarrassed for the way that we handle this after you stuck your neck out for us. And I think it's normal that you would feel frustrated and betrayed by the trust that you put in us. And told him a few other things in the email. And that one email changed the course of things. He called me the next day and left me this long voicemail. Says, "Oh my gosh, I've never received an email like that from anybody in my life. And you know what, Jeff, we're going to do everything we can. We're going to partner with you, and we're going to collaborate, and we'll help you turn this around." That one thing of me, and we're going to talk a little bit about validating in a minute, but by me admitting what I felt and validating what he felt changed everything.
Yeah. And that's not something that we normally do, especially in business, is we don't tell people how we feel, right?
No,
and we don't admit that we made a mistake.
Because what he expected me to do, and what other subcontractors do, is they try to spin it. I didn't try to spin anything. I owned up to the mistake. I said, this is what I felt, and I validated what he felt. And as long as we're talking about validating, what validating means is to give value to someone else's feelings, to tell them what you're feeling is perfectly normal. And if I was in your shoes, I would feel the same thing.
Yeah. And there's a really great poem called Listen to Me. And it's it reminds us of men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Has anybody read that or familiar with them? So he he says that women and men communicate in different ways, where when women get together, we just want to hash things out. We just want to talk about it. We just want to just say whatever's on our mind. And men, they want to problem solve, right? Oh, you got a problem? I can fix that. Oh, you got this going on? I'll tell you how to fix that, right? Women, that's not what we want. We don't want you to fix our problems. So there's this really good poem, and Jeff, I'm gonna let you read that.
And I didn't know that. And so, in all transparency, Pratima is my second and forever wife. But with my first wife, she would come to me quite often, and she's very upset about something, and typically with her job. And I would say, well, if you're that upset about it, just quit. I'll help you find another job. And she would quit, job after job after job. And I looked at it as she just couldn't fit in. I never looked at it as this was partly my failure, because I didn't know how to help her value her feelings. And so I've read this poem. We typically read this poem in our course, and it helped me realize something I'd never realized before. It says, when I ask you to listen to me and you start giving me advice, you have not done what I have asked. When I ask you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel the way I'm feeling, you're trampling on my feelings. When I ask you to listen to me, please don't feel like you have to do something to save me or solve my problems. When you try to make me feel better, you have failed me. As strange as this may seem to you, I'm asking you to listen to me, not talk or do something, but just listen to me. When you do something for me that I need to do for myself, you contribute to my feelings of inadequacy. When you accept as a simple fact that I'm feeling what I'm feeling, no matter how irrational I sound, I can quit trying to convince you, and I can go back to understanding why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. Please listen to me and just duplicate what I said so that I know that you're listening to me. That was a powerful realization. I look back at all those interactions and I think, I failed her, because she just needed me to listen to her. She just needed me to validate what it was that she was feeling, frustrated, or she felt new, at a place, and she didn't feel understood. There was 1,000 different ways that I could have helped her by just listening to her and validating, instead of trying to make her feel wrong or trying to fix or solve the problem.
Yeah, trying to fix her. Exactly. Yeah. And one of the greatest gifts that I tell Jeff that he gives me is the freedom to be mad. And it's a lot easier when I'm not mad at him, right? But it's tough, right? Like sometimes I am mad. I'm mad about some situation, or maybe something he did triggered anger, and he just lets me be angry, right? Lets me do what I need to do to get that out.
Right. That took a decade. Even after we both went through this course of practicing it, it took a decade of me practicing with her, because when she initially got mad at me, I took it really personally, and either I still try to problem solve, or I backed away from the whole thing, to stand there when she's mad and take it and then turn around and say, it's okay to be angry. It's okay. I understand. It's normal to be angry. To give, and she says that it's giving her freedom. It's from a man's perspective. I'll testify. It's hard. It's hard to do it, but it helps us heal and move forward in a way that I never would have imagined otherwise. I wish I had known in the first year of our marriage, instead of 10 years in, that if I had done this, things would have been smoother.
Yeah. And one of the things that helps us a lot is learning how to de-escalate a situation. So if I'm really angry and I lose my temper and I'm yelling, Jeff can say something like, it seems like you're really upset about this. And that gives me the space to say, yeah, I am really upset about this. So, and this is a technique that they teach with kids, right? So if a kid is crying or whatever, it seems like you're really upset. Yeah, I'm really upset. Well, tell me about that. And so with responsibility communication, then I would say, I feel really hurt because this and that happened. And I think I need to go process that. And sometimes it's helpful to have somebody just help you process that feeling of, so what does that feel like? Where do you feel that in your body? Like it feels like a lot of tension here in my heart. And breathe into that, close your eyes, breathe into it, feel it, like really validate that it's okay to be angry. Because we talk about good emotions and bad emotions. We don't classify emotions as good or bad. They're all necessary.
Yeah, a lot of people think, and I used to think, if once I became spiritual, I wouldn't feel angry anymore. I wouldn't feel frustrated. I had this Buddha sort of guru sort of image in my mind, and every time I fell short of that, I kind of judged myself. And until I realized, and I think I even read this in Conversations with God like 30 years ago, and I didn't know that I really understood it at that time. But what it made me realize is if I ever get to the point where I no longer feel frustrated or angry or about anything, creation stops, right? Because you're kind of done with life, right? Because I'm happy that I don't feel it as strongly as I used to. I don't feel it. I'm not angry for days. I don't hit a 10 very often, and I certainly don't stay there very long. But if I never have a situation any longer ever that I'm dissatisfied with, then I can't create something better. And I want to, as long as I'm alive on this earth, I want to be forever continuously improving and creating something better. So if I'm never disappointed by anything, then what's the point? How will I ever create a better life?
Yeah. So all of our emotions are important. And I think that with responsibility communication, instead of an argument lasting, for hours or days, that we can really work through it pretty quickly, and it can be over in 10 or 15 minutes, and both parties feel better and maybe even learn something about each other at the end of it. And so there are some things that get in the way, and we call those ego defenses. So our ego, when we, start feeling attacked, then our ego defenses start kicking in to try to help us out. And so one of the ways that we can keep the ego from getting involved is using the listening rule, where you acknowledge and duplicate, right? What it sounds like what you're telling me is you're really mad that I didn't get you any ice cream at the store. And then the other one is to stay in the now. So we love to like dredge up stuff from the past, right? If we haven't cleared that stuff, it's gonna come back and bite us. In fact, one of Jeff's favorite shows has a guy who keeps a bank.
Yeah, it was
like a
actually
scorecard
years ago called Rules of Engagement, and Patrick Warburton was the star, and it was a great sort of episode. It was called The Bank, and so he did something that really made his wife mad, and so he pulled this experience up and says, "Well, remember, I know you're upset about this, but remember a few years ago when you told me you had returned the video, and it turned out you hadn't returned it, and I ended up paying $50 of late fees for a video you never returned. I didn't get upset about that. So maybe you can overlook this, And so he literally kept a little notebook of a bank of the things that she had done, so he could use them later to get it at a get out of jail free card, And so that is an ego defense. It is an avoidance technique. And while it's very funny to do that, and I've thought about it, but this is actually better. I want to stay in the now. I don't want to dredge up something that we did 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It's better if we heal what just happened, what's happening right now.
Yeah. And instead of blaming and judgment, using I feel statements, like that is extremely important. So you make me sick, or you're always wrong, or always and never, 2 words we try not to use in conversations. And then arguing about details, like this one just drives me crazy. If you say it's 10:45, no, it isn't. It's 10:42. Like, oh my God, seriously?
We have a teenager that is very, she focuses on irrelevant details, and we call it making the important unimportant and the unimportant important. She's
Yeah,
focused on these irrelevant details. That is the unimportant. She's making those important so she can avoid what's really important.
yeah, yep. Avoiding what's really going on there. Does anybody have any questions or maybe some examples of arguments that they have over and over?
Well, do you have any forms I can use to keep my bank account records going forward?
Yeah, we have an Excel spreadsheet that is the date and the time, the incident.
Yeah. And the list goes on, doesn't that sound like a song we know?
Yes.
Yes, the list goes on. So do any of you feel like there are things in here that we've talked about that you are using successfully or that you'd like to try using?
Well, I can say that one thing that Jim has been doing over the last few months that I really appreciate is the gift of presence and looking at me when I have something to say, and not like walking away when I think I'm having a conversation and then he's gone, right?
Yeah.
He's not there.
Yeah.
And that means a lot, right?
Yeah. I used to do that all the time. Like when it would get too heated, I would just have to walk away.
Well, this isn't even in a heated moment. This is just that I'm having a conversation and he's not there.
You turn around, he's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
He's
We
like
didn't
a
get to-
cat.
We didn't get to the heated moments yet.
Jim,
How
don't
long have
forget
you
that.
been
You're not
married?
39 years.
Oh, so
Uh-huh.
are there any communication techniques that have worked for you guys?
We're just beginning to learn.
I've been trying to get him interested in communication techniques for many years.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that we have known about this stuff for all 15 years of our marriage, but it's still something that doesn't come like naturally. Like I still have to work at it. And I have to remind myself to, oh, I need to validate. Oh, I forgot to validate that. And when a conversation does go sideways, especially with my teenager, I can look back and say, oh, you know what? I probably should have just said, that sounds really frustrating. And I'm sorry that you're going through this. And Catherine, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
A technique that I used, learned years and years and years ago was the I, you, and if I feel such and such when you do such and such. But here's the kicker. Was that your intention?
Right.
And when you add, was that your intention, then that often gives them time to reflect on what they were doing that was causing between the two of you, each of you being upset. And my husband and I were married for 47 years. So I can
Right.
tell you
Wow.
it's effective.
Well, there's sometimes if you ask the question, was that your intention? And the response will get, no, that was just a bonus.
Oh,
I knew it was going to be a smart ass remark.
We can always count on you, Rick, for
Why I'm here.
I was gonna one thing that you guys I've noticed just in your conversation between you and Jeff, Fatima and Jeff, and also even with Jim and Tracy, was gratitude. each one of you had acknowledged the other one and said, I really appreciate that you do this. I appreciate you took the time. I appreciate this. And that's a huge thing as well, because that is another form of communication and showing that you are grateful for something that they've acknowledged or done. And I think you guys kind of have touched on it in that you're talking about this communication, and I hear you and acknowledging that. But the gratitude is something that, I mean, just in your conversations and watching you go back and forth with this communication is apparent as well.
Yeah, thank you. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's very true. I am very grateful for the relationship that we've created. And it hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been, all fun, and it's been a lot of tears, and it's been work, right? And so I am grateful.
And nobody tells us it's supposed to be really hard work. Like nobody tells you that. Like when you get married, it's like it's a job. It is not just oh, we got married and we love each other and everything's going to be rainbows and butterflies and happy. It is continual, because we all also evolve, and we've talked about this in other things where, like, as you evolve as a person, and you were just talking about it, that if you're never angry, you don't change. So then as you evolve, now you have a whole new person to start evolving around and dealing and learning and changing with. It's nobody tells us that it's gonna that it's a job.
And the little things become the big things.
Yeah.
So true.
And Rachel,
early on when you were talking about how women discuss things versus how men do, I found that very true in our early days together. So I would start out my conversation with, I have a problem, but I do not need you to solve it. I just need you to listen to what I'm saying, please. And
that's a wonderful technique.
Kind of sets the tone. And then it's a lot easier to go from that point, because you set out the rules of engagement.
Yeah.
There was something that Rachel said that really Pratima led us into this year, is we had kind of hit a plateau, I'll say, at the end of 2022 or 2021, and we're still kind of struggling with some aspects of our relationship. And she went to a Dr. Joe Dispenza week-long meditation conference, and she literally came back a different person. And then she went on another one in April, for another week or so, and signed me up. Whether I told her, I said, I'll go in October in when it comes to Dallas. I've got a lot going on at work. She says, no, there's one coming in June. You're going to go to that one. I said, no, I really don't think I'm going to have time. She signed me up, scheduled my hotel, and I went, and I'm tremendously grateful, because she was right. I needed it, and it changed me. I probably used to meditate maybe once a week, and I would sit down and I would find some guided meditation on YouTube. But now I'm meditating 4 or 5 times a week for an hour at a time with these. And I really believe in the techniques that Dr. Dispenza is using. It has changed who I am and taken me to the next level. But Pratima drove this for our family. She took our daughter to another one in October in Dallas, and so Pratima got 3 weeks with him this year, but our daughter got a week and I got a week, and it has completely changed the dynamic of our family. And it's funny, because all the things that we've been trying to really master for the last 15 years came to fruition this year, because once we quieted our mind down to where we weren't reacting, it's like now we can apply these things and be that compassionate person to our partner when these emotions arise. And the skirmishes don't last nearly as long, and aren't as tense as they were even before this last year, before we started meditating on a regular basis. It's completely transformed us. So thank you, Pratima, for driving that.
I have to say, I love hearing that too, because again, the gratitude, and then also evolving and pushing. And that's something like for me that I look at in my relationship. My wife and I have been together 23 years. And you have ups and downs, and like we all know it. Um, but the whole point is to evolve for the better. And that's what she was trying to do. That's what you've done and what you've accomplished. And it's really nice to see. It's nice to watch, to just in somebody watching and like listening to you guys talk, you can tell that there's a lot of, she picks up where you stop and you pick up where she stops and lead into each other. Um, it's nice to see this type of evolve.
But
Thank
I don't
you.
know that I could have changed without her changing. When she changed, it's like she brought a completely different energy to our relationship, and it gave me a vacuum of space to change. And I know that if I would have gone to the conference first, you know, it could have all snowballed around the same way. But when I saw, and it wasn't even what I saw, when she got into the car, when I picked her up from the airport, she felt different to me. It's like the person that gone. And I got to tell you, I've seen that person once in the last year. Only once in the last year has that person come back, and they didn't come back very long. And she was back. Says, oh, it was almost like she said, "Oh no, I don't want to see that person again." And she's like meditated an hour a day since then, and I have, you know, my partner back.
I love it.
Yeah. So one of the things that, you talk about evolving, and really, if you can take on that, the conflict that I have is really to help me evolve. If I'm getting angry about something, or if I'm feeling like not appreciated, like that's a big one, right? I don't feel appreciated. That's not about the other person. That's about me allowing myself to receive appreciation. So that's an opportunity for me to look at, oh, that's something I need to heal. And you're just kind of triggering that for me. You're stepping on my sore toe about that.
Yeah.
So I hope.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So that thing about she stepping on a sore toe, that's a really kind of an important point about this whole process. It's helpful to understand when you're staying in the now. So there's if you walk down the street and you step on somebody's toe and they just say, "Hey, you stepped on my toe," and you go, "Oh, sorry," and you go on. But if that person's toe was broken and festered and it's been swollen for a while, their reaction to you stepping on their toe may be a completely different thing. And so if her reaction or my reaction is way more than what the situation really calls for, then we know, oh, hey, man, this is not about me. This is, I triggered something within you that really, and the interesting thing is, man, 10 or 15 years ago, when I stepped on her sore toe, I thought it was me. I thought, man, I really did something wrong here. And she's really blowing up for way more than what I thought this was, and what I now, and so, and my reaction would be really strong. I would get really defensive. And now what happens is, if I see that huge, really strong thing, I immediately am able to switch into a more compassionate thing, because I know that has nothing to do with me. And I'm able to more quickly turn around and say, wow, you're really upset. What's going on? And give her that space to communicate what she's, and if she starts to come out with, a long sort of ego narrative of what's happening, then I will change her. It's like I pivot and I say, well, what are you feeling? And that gets her out of her mind of the events and all this, and gets her to pivot to, what she's feeling. And we keep, these feeling charts, and I've shared these, I think, with the group the last time, but we keep those all kind of handy because it helps to know, oh, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling hurt, or disappointed, or embarrassed, or whatever,
Embarrassed.
right? And being able to guide someone back to their feelings, and once they start to talk about what their feelings, then she knows at that point, I need to sit with this and I need to feel what it is that I'm feeling, instead of, it may not be beneficial for me to continue to talk about it. I may need to just go and feel it.
Well,
Yeah.
Jeff and Pratima, could you talk to us some more about the spiritual nature of the communications?
Yeah. I mean, so for us, the point of us being together is that we help each other evolve spiritually, right? We help each other's spiritual growth. And sometimes that evolution comes from helping us kind of process our emotions from the past. So when we have something that makes me upset in the present, it's probably coming from my past. And so being able to process that emotion helps me evolve spiritually.
And there's, Wayne Dyer said something really important a long time ago, that all of those thoughts that are going on in my mind, right? Whether it's all these ego thoughts or all the feelings those are all like prison bars. And those are all prison bars, ego prison bars, that is keeping me from experiencing life as the spirit that lives within me, right? As the God that wants to shine forth from within me. As long as I'm holding on to all these old feelings and I'm justifying in my mind with these kind of endless loop of thoughts, of the same thoughts over and over, as long as I'm doing that, I'm keeping it's like I'm keeping my spirit in prison. There is a glory of God that wants to shine forth from me, and the way that we motivate and free each other is by helping to release it. And because as Dr. Dyer said, when you create enough space between those bars, then you walk out of prison, right? And so that's what, when you ask how doing this increases your spiritual growth, that's how doing it is, because we're able to live more as magical spiritual beings that are, if I'm not enslaved to my past, right, then I'm able to create my life the way that I want it to be, instead of just continuing to react over and over from the same place.
What are some of the techniques that you use to go ahead and bring yourself into that place of compassion? Because when you're, I mean, usually like how you guys are talking about, you have your past, which might bring up this anger, and then now they're upset. And so now you both are at this point of activated emotion. And one of you needs to come down to that point of compassion, or both of you need to come down to that point of compassion. But what is it that you have done to bring yourself there? Because that's not an easy thing, especially in the time. And I know like you can separate and go in separate rooms, but there is still a point that you have to come back together and still come back at it with that compassion.
Yeah.
Tim, I'll let you talk to this one.
I totally agree with you. And the one thing that has helped me really is meditation, because it helps me to I don't want to say regulate my emotions, but it helps me to stay even keel, and it helps me to be in my heart, like come from a place from my heart. So it does help. If I get really upset and I say I need a break, I'll be back. Like give me 10 minutes. And then once I take that 10 minutes to close my eyes, breathe, really feel into that emotion, or I don't know, maybe pick up a pillow and beat something up. Like sometimes that's helpful too. And then when we come back, you really have to make that commitment of, let's have this conversation and let's have it with compassion. And sometimes, people are going to get elevated and maybe have, a word that's like time out, or take a breath, or let's, hold my hand, or, something. But there's definitely, it's helpful to have a plan in place.
And that's really the key, is having that plan. And one of the things that we've done, I thought Pratima and I had worked through almost all of our anger and frustration until we adopted a child and brought a child into our life that had a tremendous amount of baggage. And I found anger I never knew I had still within me. And so I had to learn at a whole new level of how to let go. And so one of the things that we developed as a family is we had a monthly family meeting. And we would we would sit together as a family and give her an equal voice and say, and everybody would go down around the table and we'd say, okay, tell me 3 things that are working well. What's working well from my perspective about Pratima and our daughter and me. What do I think I'm doing well, right now since the last time? And Pratima takes notes and she writes all this stuff down, and everybody gets a turn, and they're free to say whatever they want. And then we talk about, okay, what's not going well, right? And again, everybody gets an opportunity. This is what I think, and especially with my daughter, we wanted her to be able to have a voice, especially coming out of the foster system. We wanted her to have a voice to say, Dad, this is what I think you're not doing well. And this is what I think Mom's not doing well. And this is what I think I'm not doing well. And she was honest with those things. And we've used this technique even within our relationship of, Pratima, this is what you're not doing well. And she's told me this is what you're not doing well. And I have to own those things because it's a sacred space that we've created there. And then after we finish that round, we do name 3 things that you want to see an improvement in. What do you want me to work on? And it may be that, one of the things may be that when you get frustrated with us, we want you to walk away. We don't want you to say anything. You don't have to heal right now. Just walk away, but then come back to us and tell us what it is that you're feeling. And so that was a lesson that I had to learn. Was okay, I'm gonna walk away, and I'm not gonna say anything in the moment. I'm just gonna walk away, and then I'll come back. So and everybody had that opportunity, and we took that seriously. I would take those things. These are the things that I'm gonna work on the next month, and I would consciously, okay, this is what I'm gonna work on, and then we would sit down the next month, and we've looked back through this journal, that goes back years, and we've healed so much, but we consciously chose to do it. So when you ask Rachel about a technique that you can use, it has to be a conscious choice between both partners that we're going to agree to work on these things, and we're going to be open and honest, and we're going to compliment, okay, this is what you're doing great. This is what I love about you, but these are the things that are not going well. And these are the things I would really like you to work on, and give that your wife, give her that equal space to tell you those things. And then when you consciously work on those things together, then it's an evolution, right? Of when you come and you sit back down the next month, then you're saying, okay, well, this has gotten better, or this thing has gotten better. This thing hasn't gotten better, but this thing has gotten better. So you have that opportunity to have that open dialogue, and it's all written down. So it's something you can look back on as kind of a growth journal.
Can I take us back to something that Pratima said a minute ago? You made the statement that the point of being together is to help us on our spiritual path. And so I find that interesting, because typically we date people not thinking, I'm going to help this Joe on his path, right? That's not what draws us together. And it's also not what keeps us together, or even what helps us say, yes, this is the person I want to enter into a long-term relationship with, or a marriage with, or I just want to be best friends with this person. We have a lot of fun. We never, it's rarely an intentional, conscious effort of how do I help lift this person up with the intent of helping them along their spiritual path. Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of how these techniques have been helpful to you? Because communication helps us in every situation, but in terms of your why, is this?
Yeah. And I would say that it's not my job to push Jeff on his spiritual journey. Like, that's his journey, and my journey is my journey. But my goal is unconditional love. And that's what I've decided, right? Jesus was really good at that. And I think he wanted us to all be really good at that. So that's something I really want for myself, is unconditional love. And when I don't respond with unconditional love, Jeff can help me to see, well, maybe you've got some things in your past that are holding you back from experiencing unconditional love. Like, you're still hurting, like your heart still hurts about something. And so he'll trigger something so that I can look at it and say, oh, I think I'm still holding on to this resentment, or this fear, or this anger, or whatever that is. And this is an opportunity for me to now start healing it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what advice would you give to those on the call that are not married at this moment, but may in the future, in terms of, looking at your dating relationships that may be leading to something serious or into potential marriage? What advice would you give from this spiritual relationships point of view?
Stay that way.
I was talking to you, Rick.
I mean,
I'll start, and then I'll let Pratima, chime in here. But I will say that I went through the self-mastery thing and learned, it kind of took me to the next level. And after having experienced my first marriage, I knew that that I wanted a spiritual relationship with my next partner. And so I prayed for a year. I told God, this is what I want. And then I'll let you, share your thing, because I think you were doing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely something that was, and Jeff and I lived in different cities. And if we met online, and if we had met in person, I don't know that I ever would have gone up to him and started a conversation with him. He just, it was we kind of don't run in the same circles, right? I'm, like, say, he's cowboy and I'm Indian, and I don't know if we would have met if it hadn't been for online. But when we did, we asked each other some really deep questions, like, what is your definition of God, and what is important to you in life? And the communication thing it's so critical in every relationship that we have, especially with people that we love, because those are the people that we feel like we don't have to be nice to, right? you're already married to me. You're going to have to deal with me however I communicate with you. So let's make that communication positive and productive. And that's what we try to do with our skirmishes, is really make them productive.
And the story I was trying to get you to tell was that you had prayed, you had gone to Sedona and you had prayed for a spiritual relationship. And the answer you got back was, it's coming, but he's not ready yet. And at that time, I wasn't ready. But at the point, I think it was September 2004, I had just started the self-mastery course. It took me 6 or 8 months before, and we didn't meet until the next June, really, face to face. If I had met her in September of 2004, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for her.
Yeah. I was pretty mad at God. I'm not going to lie. I was pretty frustrated with God about that. But patience, intention.
And one of the things is, I had actually written out a whole page of what it was I wanted my next partner, the qualities I wanted in my next partner. And she had actually done the same. And I don't know that I have those journals anymore, but we sat down one day after we'd been dating a while, and I read hers and she read mine. It's like, oh my God, I'd been dating her for 6 months before I even went back and looked at that journal, and she checked all of those boxes. But I put an intention out there.
You prayed a bold prayer.
Yeah.
I prayed for Pratima, and she was God's answer to that prayer.
I took a conflict resolution, or I shouldn't say resolution, but conflict management class recently. Not to take us back to the conflict conversation, but it is interesting how I think nobody likes conflict, right? But one of the things that I really grasped from this, but also from that class, is and not just in one-on-one personal relationships, but in groups and teams, that it was conflict creates the energy that makes change possible. And you can look at that as a social justice statement. You can look at that as a personal religious statement. When we've fought with God and we've had a crisis of faith of, man, I've seen you work miracles in my life. And why, of all the things, is this the one thing you are silent on, God, right? When there is conflict, whether it's with each other or a team or with God or with ourselves, I think the conflict is healthy as long as it is handled with grace and compassion. The conflict opens the door for positive change, right? For growth in us, for stronger relationships, for overhauling oppressive systems. But it happens because there's tension. I like tension because conflict's a little more fighty, right? But tension is like, it's there, it's like under the surface, but it hasn't boiled over yet. It's not out of control. And I think that, we tend to still feel the tension, and it's just easier to say, I'm gonna address that. No, I'm gonna go over here now. Let's just don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact, because then it's gonna get really uncomfortable. So anyway, Ron John's got his hand up, so I'm gonna shut up so he can talk.
No worries. Jeff, Pratima, thank you. It's I'm glad I was able to join. Apologies, I joined a few minutes late. I was driving. I was at the Church of Costco, and service dragged on. But anyway, a couple of thoughts. So, Pratima said she was angry at God, right? And what I've started weaving into some of my conversations when I see people are angry with God is, I tell them it's okay to be angry with God, because God doesn't hold grudges.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, the real message there is we need to learn to shake off our grudges, because if we can't shake off our grudges, we can't move forward. It's an anchor, right? It drags you back. And of course, I have to thank Jeff, because one of the greatest things he ever taught me was going through the process of forgiveness, right? And that was shaking off grudges, shaking off the past, and moving forward. So that's one thing. The other thing that I wanted to kind of share was, I think of human beings as having three personas, right? The personal persona, the professional persona, and I don't care what persona you think it is, but this is me kind of thing, right? And the professional persona comes out at work or in relationships that have been developed through some kind of a professional connection. May not necessarily be at work, maybe, just through some kind of a professional event or whatever. The personal is truly family. And then the I don't care is I'm at the grocery store and, I have to have some kind of interaction with someone, could be unpleasant or pleasant, but the outcome can be whatever. But the communication style that I've noticed is different in all three. And to a certain degree, I wish we would adopt the approach we take with our professional conversations and apply that to our personal conversations, and sort of collapse it all into one persona. And we tend to lay emphasis and priority and really put our professional interactions up on a pedestal, as opposed to putting our personal communications and relationships on a pedestal. But this would all become so much more easier if we used a very similar communication style across the board, right? And that's a commitment I'm trying to make to myself. I know Yasmin's on the call, Ranu's not on the call, Simran's not on the call, but I'm trying. And 2023, my commitment to myself is that I am going to try to, whether it's conflict resolution or whatever it is, I'm going to try to deal with it the same way I would in a professional setting and I do a lot of that, right, in a professional setting because of over the years. So that's sort of my just my take on it, and anyone can add whatever they want to add to that.
I was going to share a book, trying to pull it up right now because I'm blanking on the title. Hang on just a second here. It is, here we go. It's a very tiny, it's more like a booklet, like a saddle stitched. It's really tiny, easy read for anybody, even those that aren't big readers. And it's called Discover Your Conflict Management Style by Speed, like S-P-E-E-D, Lease, L-E-A-S is the last name. And it was one of the books that we used in the class I mentioned earlier. And it was fascinating because before you even read the book, you do the, self-evaluation at the end. And what is helpful is that and kind of speaking to what Ranjan was just saying, is we have a tendency to respond our way, right, to different things, whether it's, communication styles or it's conflict management or whatever. And one of the things that I realized was that you're most likely to gravitate to what is naturally you. When you mentioned in the workplace, Ranjan, it made me think of it because I, for grins, took the test 3 times. I took it from how I would respond in the workplace in the corporate environment that I spent 30 years in. Then I took it again for work and for home and marriage, how I respond to conflict in my home relationship. And then I took it a 3rd time as a leader of Ekklesia. And when you're in a role that's in the pastoral care role, and you are trying to, bring people together in non-conflictual ways to have challenging conversations, is how, what is my conflict management style? How do I answer those questions from that vantage point? And I was surprised at just how different all three really were. But way I naturally would answer in my marriage was completely different from when I was in the workplace. And I think the workplace is probably my natural, like what feels right for me to how to respond. And I thought, why don't you use the same techniques, or recognize that in your, interpersonal relationships or your home relationships? Because if that's more you, then when I'm trying to manage conflict in the home, I wind up getting frustrated even more because I'm not being my authentic self, right? But the other piece of that is recognizing all of the forms of how people deal with conflict, and being able to recognize that sometimes we need to shift, take that hat off and put a different hat on because it's right for the situation. That's probably more so in teams and things. But I found that, it's not enough to just say, this is how I am. It's like, how do I help lift that person up? How do I help not just be compassionate in my tone and in my style, but how do I help this person and this situation keep moving forward, right? And it's always that progress. And so those, I think anything like that, and I think kind of back to your thoughts, Jeff, on the spiritual relationship is, yes, we all have our own spiritual path, and mine and my husband's are vastly different. But how do I use the techniques that we have at our disposal to help support him or support people that are close friends, to continue to move forward, even when there gets to that point where there's something that's like a blockade, or there's at least a speed bump, and I think it's easier when it's still a speed bump if we address it sooner before it gets too pent up.
Right.
But it's our tendency to avoid it. So then meanwhile, it starts boiling up.
Well, sure. And a lot of one of the reasons that people avoid these things is because none of us were really taught how to process our feelings. So we're, and a lot of us have feelings pent up from our childhoods, and so by the time we're in relationships, we're not consciously interacting with someone. We're reacting based on what already may feel like a white hot stove to even touch. And so that was why self-mastery was so important for both Pratima and I when we went through it. And self-mastery is, of course, not the only way to learn how to process your emotions. There's lots of ways out there, but it was the first thing that really forced me to peel these things away later at a time. That was a very safe manner and taught how to release those emotions a layer at a time, because what I feared was that somebody was going to make me put my finger on that white hot stove that I knew, and it was such an enormous amount of emotion that I knew was down there, and once I learned how to feel my emotions and feel and I don't know if I shared this with you the last time that we met, there's originally put out on CD called Yoga for Emotional Flow by Stephen Cope. And I thought I may have shared this with you the last time that we met, but and now it's available on streaming on Amazon and maybe elsewhere, but it's Cope, C-O-P-E, Stephen with a P-H, but it's Yoga for Emotional Flow. And it's not yoga in the traditional sense. These are guided emotional feeling exercises. He has one thing where he really talks about what emotions are and the wisdom to be gained and all of that. And then he's got 3 exercises. And I think one of them may even be available out there on YouTube called the daily body scan. You know, it's teaching you to feel into your body on a daily basis and release any emotions there. The one that resonated most with me, that I needed the most, was called Riding the Wave, because I was getting into some big, heavy emotions, and he was guiding me through this process of learning how to see that emotion, and then just, you know, not to delve all the way in, but just to touch it and just to flow with it and allow myself to breathe into whatever that I could handle at that time and feel through it. And Pratima and I were talking yesterday in preparation for this, for what we were going to say today. And, you know, she talked about some of the ways that she, when she needs to process emotion, she needs to take a drive in her car, and she needs to listen to certain songs that will help her, you know, bring up emotions in a safe way that she can breathe into it and release it. You know, when I was right before we met, there was a movie that came out called Antoine Fisher that dealt with a lot of abuse, and much more, probably more intense than I had dealt with as a child, but there were some similar notes there. And watching that movie alone in my own space provided me a safe place, because there were parts of that movie that would trigger me, that would allow me to cry and to release these huge amounts of emotion that I had repressed all of my life. So there's, you know, like I say, there is no one right way. I love this, a Hindu proverb I learned many years ago. It says, all rivers lead to the same ocean. And so there's no one right way to do this, but if we are to grow spiritually, we have to really actively work on eliminating these barriers to opening our heart. And that's been one of, really, if I'm being real honest, it wasn't that other people weren't giving to me, it's that I couldn't receive. And so my challenge and one of my big goals, even for 2023, is to open my heart much wider. But I've got to eliminate those barriers to be able to do that. And so it's, like I said, like Pratima said earlier, this is a continual process. This is an evolution. It's not just, hey, I'm here.
Well, Pratima, do you have anything you'd like to say to wrap up? And we'll also open the floor for anyone else that has additional questions.
Yeah, I hope that you guys got something out of this that you will take and implement in your next conversations with your loved ones. You know, and one thing, something Rachel has said, is how do you stay compassionate? There is a meme that I had seen, that it's a sculpture of an adult man and an adult woman with their back to back, and then it's like a wire mesh, and inside you see their inner child, like seeking to connect. And that visual really speaks to the compassion that we all, you know, when we're angry and we're upset and we're highly emotional, it's really just our little child inside that's seeking to be healed. And if we can keep that compassion with each other, then we can have a spiritual relationship with everyone.
Thank you. Does anyone have any final thoughts or questions for them? No?
I do, actually. My questions are more along the lines of, like, Jeff, you talked about yoga for emotional flow. I think that's what it was, by
Yes.
Stephen Cope.
Yes.
Are there other books or other meditations or things that you recommend for people to use that you guys have found useful on your way, and something we can go ahead and put in for those that aren't here, that can't ask questions but would like to know more information of how they can do this, that I can go ahead and put in the chat to share?
I'll let Pratima speak in a minute. I will say that yoga for emotional flow is what I started with, but on YouTube there are dozens and perhaps hundreds of guided exercises, and all you would have to type in is like emotional release exercise. My daughter, for example, uses the tapping exercises, right? And Brad Yates, and I think the Ortner kids, I think there's a Nick Ortner, and I can't remember the young lady's name, but it's Ortner. I think it's Ortner, tapping.
Jessica? I think it's Jessica Ortner or Jennifer Ortner, something like that.
But they do a tapping for emotional release. That method isn't as effective for me, but it is really effective for my daughter, and it's something that's helped her a lot. So that's another aspect. Pratima, what else do you have?
For me, the thing that has helped me the most really has been the Dr. Joe Dispenza meditations. And I started with the morning meditation and the evening meditation. They're 30 minutes a piece. And now the meditations I like are really more like an hour. But
can you put that in the chat or spell that out for us?
Yeah, his last name is Dispenza, D-I-S-P-E-N.
I can put it in.
Z-A, Dr. Joe. Joe is his first name. And he does these week-long retreats all over the world. And he did the first one in Dallas at the Gaylord in October. So I think he'll start coming to the Gaylord in Dallas yearly.
Give me a second and I'll send you the link of his like his meditation page where you can purchase those.
Okay. And I put the link for the Amazon book version of the Yoga for Emotional Flow in there as well. And Rachel, thank you for adding the your finding your conflict management style. That link is up a little higher at 8:09 in the chat from Rachel to everybody. And Ron John shared a think positive note as well. So thanks for everybody for putting that stuff in there. As we wrap, I'd like to give you an opportunity to share joys, concerns that we could pray about with you tonight. And I will begin. My dad is having, I don't know what the procedure is called. It's when they shoot dye up into your heart to see where the blockages are. They're doing that tomorrow morning. And if they find it, they will immediately do surgery. So, and he's 90 years old, so it's a big deal. So we're praying for Roy King and his medical team and my mother. And then Sue Lorick, who's a member of this group, is having a hysterectomy tomorrow morning, and she's asked us to be in prayer for her as well, and her husband Greg. And our friend Jeffrey, who's kind of new in Florida, is still sick, still coughing, as is Dave. My husband is, I don't know, it was started with 4 months of COVID, and it keeps coming back every few months. And so lots of health issues with that. Anybody else?
I'll ask for prayers for Ranu's mom, as you know, as she continues to heal, and praying that she's able to feel well enough to travel to India at you know, at the end of the month.
Okay. Ranjan, what is her name?
It's Bandana, Bandana. It's spelled like bandana, but the A's are pronounced more like an O, so it's Bandana.
Okay.
And her last name is Ghose, Ghose.
Anybody else? We have something to celebrate as well. Ekklesia finally has finished the Circle Host orientation handbook and are ready to start rolling out training orientations for anyone who wants to start new circles. And so that has been a year in the making. Shouldn't have taken that long. That's all on me. but it is done. It is like, it just needs proofreading, and we're ready to roll. So that's exciting. And I'm just really grateful for all the support from the folks in Ekklesia that helped with that. Robert is a big key part of that. He's on tonight, and I just appreciate all that support. And I think if we can just take a moment of silence and do some silent prayer, and then I will finish this up. God of our breath and our sight and our hearing and our heart and our hands and our feet, we just thank you for this gathering that allows us to come together hopeful, always hopeful that we will be inspired to continue our journey closer to you, and tonight in our relationships. We just thank you for Jeff and Pratima for sharing their wisdom and their experience and their knowledge. We pray that they be blessed in that sharing, and we just pray that they will come back and continue to share with us as they continue to grow in you and to grow in their marriage. And Lord, we just thank you for the blessing of your healing, and we pray for that healing for all of these folks we have named: Bandana, Sue, Jeffrey, Dave, and Roy. If you would continue your healing work in their bodies to bring them and restore them to wholeness, and to be with them in surgery and with their medical teams, be their hands as they give them the best of care. And Lord, we just thank you for all of the things to celebrate. Help us see them this week. Help us focus on the good and the positive. Be the compassion that you have called us to be in the world. We pray this together. Amen. Thank you. That was a longer prayer than I intended, but I was feeling it.
At one point, you were just on a roll, weren't you?
I was. Oh, thank you so much, Jeff and Pratima, for doing this and for sharing all your wisdom, and Mariah sending love. Oh, I didn't know we could do that heart thing. I'm going to have to learn how to do
you
that.
can't.
So it was great having you. It was great seeing Ron John again. Tell Ronu we missed her. We always miss her when she is not with us.
I will.
She is a part of us. So we are really, really thinking about her and her mother, because I know that's been a long journey of dealing with her health and everything. So y'all have a great week. And I hope if anyone would like a link to the recording for tonight, if you know some others that missed and would like to share that, just email me or let me know right now, and I'll shoot that out as soon as the link comes to me after the meeting.
I think that tomorrow, once the link's up, I think